Serie A football returns this weekend with what is looking like one of the most competitive competitions in some time. Take your pick as to who will finish in the top four. The talent in this league is outstanding. The Serie A led in goals scored at Euro 2020, and as far as the players that represented their nations, more came from Serie A than any other league. What's up, I'm Adrian and welcome back to Rabona TV. I'm not alone in this video, as I've called upon some experts in their respective fields. For Juve, I've brought along Marco Messina from Italian Football TV to give me the lowdown on all things bianconeri. For Inter Milan, Uncle Sharma is back once again to walk us through what has been an insane summer for Inter and its supporters. And finally, Matt Santangelo and Martino Puccio from both State of Play podcasts and Milan Reports will give us the lowdown on how AC Milan are looking going into this season. This video was a ton of fun to produce, and if you find yourself appreciating the content, then do be sure to subscribe if you're new around here for more Serie A, La Liga, Premier League, Bundesliga, and more coverage from us here at Rabona TV. Also, make sure you show some love to the creators that joined us for this video. Their links are down below, so without further ado, let's get started. This is an interesting season for Juventus. After the Pirlo experiment, I guess we'll call it, which to be fair to him, for all the bad, he still won 2 trophies and got Champions League football. But anyway, Allegri is back, a familiar face, but according to Marco, his approach has changed a bit. We'll get into that with him for sure. A more attacking approach on the way for Juve? We'll see. But from Allegri to Sarri to Pirlo and back to Allegri again, the common critique of Juve, one of the things that is always talked about as a weakness for them, is their midfield. It was just announced by Romano that Locatelli will sign for Juve, but is he the key to their midfield? Or are they still missing a regista? Should that be Juve's focus in the transfer market, or can someone else from within the squad flourish under Allegri? Let's get into it with Marco from IFTV. This man is all over the internet spreading the Calcio love. You'll find him on Juventus's official English Twitch streams and so much more. Vamos. So let's look at Juve's transfer market in particular here. How do you feel about it? Now, of course, I'm speaking to you right as Locatelli was basically announced by Romano. So how do you feel about Juve's transfer dealings?
Yeah, I think all things considered, it will be a successful transfer market. Obviously, they've let Demiral go, who went to Atalanta, which as much as I like the guy, he didn't really have a place. It was going to be hard for him. I respect him for wanting to be able to start at a club. He deserves that as a youngster. They're bringing in Locatelli now. It's been a month that I think the boy has been waiting, and every Juventus fan has been refreshing every single day. Oh, they're meeting. Now he finally will join the team, which I think that he's going to add a lot to the squad. I think obviously Juventus's midfield has been a thing that they've lacked in recent times. And while I've never been somebody that loved Locatelli, I'm not a huge Locatelli fan in the sense that I don't think he's a top player. I don't think he's like a Pogba, which is kind of the dream that we have. But being realistic, he's better than what Juventus have. And I think he's a young Italian kid who did great at the Euros and can help with the current selection of players that Juventus have, especially going forward, which is something that Rabiot, Bentancur, McKennie, Artur, going forward, they don't score goals and they don't really provide enough. And even Allegri has been critical of Bentancur in the past, and even McKennie. They don't really have that goal scorer in the midfield. And I think Locatelli can bring that. And listen, the rest is going to depend on Ronaldo. If Ronaldo stays, then yes, I think you could say with all the circumstances, with everything that's happening around in football and with Serie A clubs, Juventus have had a successful transfer market.
Speaking of this Locatelli transfer, do you think that addresses one of the issues in the midfield? Because obviously, he's more of a box-to-box type of midfielder in a sense. But do you think that you guys still have a regista problem, or are you not worried about that?
Yeah, this is where the big debate comes in with people where, some people are like, no, he's only a regista. Well, I agree with you. He's a box-to-box midfielder for me. But you're right, man. You're right. A regista, it could be a problem. Artur is not going to be back for a little while. And even when he's back, he's not been so loved by the fans. I personally really like Artur. Bentancur has been said in the past that he can't play regista by Allegri himself. So yeah, it does pose a problem. It looks like they're going to play a 3-man midfield. That's how Allegri's been going. And I don't think that Locatelli solves the midfield problems. It definitely makes it better. And I think that also all the players need to step up in the midfield.
Yeah, it's certainly looking promising for Rabiot in particular because, you know, he came off a pretty decent summer. He was starting for France as well, which is something that he hadn't really necessarily been doing in the past. So I think that it's more promising, although it does sort of seem like that is the one gaping hole. Well, not gaping hole, but one potential problem area or an area that hasn't been solved quite yet. So, I mean, I haven't been able to catch any of Juve's preseason matches. It's the return of Allegri. Does it look pretty familiar to what you saw from him in the past, or does it sort of show signs of him going in a slightly different direction?
No, definitely. I've watched all of the preseason matches so far, and I was surprised as well. I thought it was going to be a classic 4-2-3-1 from Allegri. Now, obviously, 4-3-3 has been the trend. Italy won the Euros with 4-3-3, and he's been going with that. And it does look like a different Allegri. Allegri has always been a stabilizer. I mean, he's going to put the team on the field. They're not going to be beautiful, but you know they're going to get a result. You know, last year with Pirlo, they lost 4 points to Benevento, who's in Serie B. That will never happen under Allegri. You know, he puts out his team that's going to be stable. But from what I'm seeing so far and from what I'm hearing in the press conferences and the feelings around the player and the people that are close to Allegri, it's a new Allegri that wants to be a little bit more attack-minded. You're seeing he was screaming in one of the friendly matches that I don't remember who it was against, but he was screaming at the players to go forward, to pass the ball forward. And last year, one of the big criticisms I had of Andrea Pirlo is everything was backwards. And I'm seeing with Allegri, he wants to push forward. He says, we got to go towards goal, which I think is a positive sign. And I think these past 2 years that he's been away from football, where he had a time to breathe, where he had time to really watch how football has evolved, it helped him become this Allegri 3000, which I've been trying to say around that he's definitely an improved coach.
So you say that he wants to be a little bit more attack-minded. So let's look at the attack here because, you know, Dybala in particular, some say his best season was with Maurizio Sarri. That for all of the things that Sarri brought or didn't bring to Juve, he at least got the best out of Paulo Dybala. Some look to his early seasons with Allegri. How is he looking coming into this? And do you think that he'll be the key to sort of making this attack more fluid?
Absolutely. I think that this has to be Dybala's year. Last year wasn't good for him. He struggled obviously with COVID and with injuries. It wasn't a great time for him. Allegri has made it very clear that Dybala is crucial to what he wants to do. He's even named him vice captain. He played in the falsa nueve position in the last friendly against Atalanta with Ronaldo on the left and Chiesa on the right, which I absolutely loved. He was picking up the ball in the midfield when he dropped deep, and he's a guy, he likes to touch the ball. He can't just stand isolated, you know, on top of the field. That's not Dybala. He likes to touch. He likes to move around. He likes to have this freedom, and I think it helped Ronaldo and Chiesa because when he dropped in, these guys ran in behind, which they did really well. So I think that's what we could see. Yeah,
I think you absolutely nailed it, and by extension, Allegri, in that he's one of those players where the more involved he is, the better he does, it seems. Because, you know, it's sort of like, this is a random person to sort of cross-reference, but Thomas Lemar at Atletico Madrid had so much promise, and then he just did so poorly because he was isolated on the wings playing for a Simeone side. So, of course, he's never going to really get into the game. But then you move him centrally, he's more involved, and everything just sort of clicked from there. So yeah, it's certainly exciting. This Chiesa, especially Chiesa, off the year that he's had now, it's 2021 has been excellent for him, along with Ronaldo, a Dybala that's firing. I mean, you got to be much more enthusiastic going into this, and that it's not just going to be give the ball to Cuadrado and cross now.
Yes. Yes, it should be. It should be. The front three is very exciting. If that's the front three that stays, I mean, it's got talents galore. It's got a nice mix between youth and experience. And I think Chiesa, like you said, rightfully so. He's had a fantastic year. Allegri was a little bit critical of Chiesa already, saying that he needs to track back a little bit. And the player that's going to play in that right position needs to almost become like a right midfielder to help defend. And it becomes like a 4-4-2 in defense. So he had a funny quote about, like, you know, the field is like uphill for Chiesa, where tracking back, he's a little bit slower. So we'll see how that works out. But I think that Chiesa, you know, once he gets his footing in, he's going to be an added value for the team.
As you know, and as we've covered to a great degree on this channel, Inter's financial situation has certainly dictated what's happened with their squad. A Scudetto winning squad losing 3 integral pieces in Lukaku, Hakimi, and perhaps arguably the most important, Antonio Conte. But is it all doom and gloom for Inter, or will they still be a top side thanks to some of the moves they've made? As expected and as mentioned in the intro, for this segment we'll speak with another great friend of the channel and one of the more underrated Serie A commentators in my opinion, Uncle Sharma. You guys will recognize his face by now. I think I've made 2 inter videos with him, and he also helped out during Euro 2020 with our Italy coverage. So let's go. In this market, and I know that this sounds idiotic asking an Inter supporter this, considering the losses, but that's the reality. So how do you feel considering the large losses, but the few signings that have come in as well?
Bro, it's hard to be positive, to be honest. Scudetto winning team, Lukaku MVP, Hakimi the best in his position. Losing those 2 guys is a massive blow. There's no way around it. But the fact that if we look at other parts of the team, I feel like there has been some good movements. Obviously, Christian Eriksen is another loss that it's not really talked about anymore, but he is pretty much a loss. I have very little hope he comes back to playing, but for Inter, due to the Olympic committee rules in Italy quite strict, I don't see him coming back for Inter. But Hakan on a free transfer from our arch rivals AC Milan. Let's not forget his first 6 months last season were really good, and then he just dipped off, but he's a good player. And Eriksen, let's not forget, at the beginning of the 6 months before with Conte, he was basically not even a squad player at times. So in that sense, if you have someone like Hakan being able to have an impact throughout the year, we've upgraded there in kind of consistency terms. On the left-hand side, I was very vocal about not being a fan of Ashley Young last season. I felt like he's one of the weaker players for Inter in the squad. And I feel like Di Marco coming back from his loan at Hellas Verona, where he really impressed. Hakimi going to Dumfries now is a definite downgrade. Anyone was going to be a downgrade, but let's see how bad of a downgrade it is. He had a really good Euros, as everyone saw, but I'm not really a fan of, judging players off international performances. And then we'll see what the market holds now in terms of the Lukaku replacement. We've got Edin Dzeko in, who I've always liked, but he's 35 years old. There's rumors of Duvan Zapata, Joaquin Correa. Let's see what happens in the Mercato.
Yeah, Zapata, as you mentioned. There's also Correa that's been thrown around. He clearly has the Inzaghi links there. Even Insigne at one point was being thrown around. So if you could choose, as someone who could fill in that sort of Lukaku role, I mean, I guess the Lukaku role is kind of Dzeko, even though they're completely different players. Who would you take? Would you prefer Correa? Would you prefer Zapata in there?
Well, I always believe that you have to back your manager. With Conte, we gave him every player that pretty much wanted. He wanted Lukaku, he wanted, whoever we wanted, we gave it to him. So I feel like Inzaghi now, we've kind of, not given them a great start with taking away the, 2 of the best players of the team. So I feel like if he wants that Joaquin Correa kind of reunion, we should give that to him, even though I'm not sure how that would actually work. I think the plan is now to make Lautaro the main guy. He's the Lukaku replacement, I think, if Joaquin Correa comes in, because he's definitely more of a winger, second striker. Whereas Lautaro, we've seen for Argentina, he plays the lone striker role up front. For Inter, even when Icardi, the things kicked off a couple of seasons back, he played that role. So let's see if he can actually step up and fill those big Rom shoes. But for me, bring in Joaquin Correa if Inzaghi wants him.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that would be a smart move, is sort of give the guy the tools that he's asked for. And you know what? It's interesting because despite the losses of Lukaku and Hakimi and, of course, Conte, I look at this Inter squad, I look at, Inzaghi's record as a manager, and it doesn't look too bad, So what would you say is the biggest area of concern for this Inter side? Is it in the attack? Is it on the flanks, the tactics? What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's that replacement of the goals. Lukaku and Hakimi accounted for a large amount of the goals that Inter scored last year. We scored, I think 105 goals in all competitions, and obviously Lukaku was the top scorer, but Hakimi as well, that guy contributed a lot in terms of goals and assists. However, I think with Inzaghi, we've seen at Lazio that the midfielders usually do contribute a little bit more than we did with Conte last year. I think, Luis Alberto, Milinkovic-Savic used to contribute quite a bit. Obviously, they are very high quality players as well, but I feel like this year Barella has that in him. I think he can step up in terms of goal scoring. I think Hakan has got that in him, and then hopefully Dumfries, Di Marco, Perisic, whoever, Dzeko, Lautaro stepping up those numbers as well. But that is my concern going into the season. Can we score as many goals as we did?
It's and Kolarov as well. Don't forget him, man. Right?
Yeah, I hope never to see that guy starting a Serie A game.
So, I mean, and he used to play at Zaghi, didn't he, at Lazio?
Yeah, that's how long the guy's been around. He was there when Inzaghi was at Lazio. I think they even played together.
So, all right, let's look at what you've seen from this preseason so far. I obviously don't catch all of Inter's preseason matches, but what can people expect of Inter now that they're under Inzaghi? Does it sort of resemble the Inter of last season? Does it look more like Lazio of last season, or what does it look like right now?
No, it still looks very much like Inter from the last couple of seasons. Still 3-5-2 heavy. However, in the last match where there was some injury issues, he showed more tactical flexibility than Conte already. It was more like a 3-5-1-1 or a 3-6-1 with Stefano Sensi behind Dzeko, and it was really nice to see. It was a lot of switching positions. There was a lot more freedom, definitely. We know what Conte's like. Automatism, very specific tactics, very specific moves. But with Inzaghi, seems to be a little bit more freedom, a little bit more movement. And and that's one of the first things he said in this press conference as well, that he wants to bring a more attacking outlook to Inter as well. So I think we will see more nice goals. I think we saw a goal that involved 3 back heels from the Inter players against the Dinamo Kiev the other day, which was finished by Barella. So yeah, so maybe Limone ball might be hitting nicely.
AC Milan have had a great season and a half compared to what came before it. This past season, still under Pioli, they managed to secure Champions League football for the first time since the 2013-14 season, thanks to their 5-match unbeaten run to close out the season in which they didn't concede a single goal. Impressive stuff. It was absolutely an encouraging season, wasn't it? I mean, in total, AC Milan spent 18 match days at the top of the table, and expectations have absolutely been raised for this club now. The improved stability of the club is thanks in part to Elliott management that have, with the help of Maldini and others, started to turn this historic club around and get them back to where they're expected to be, the Champions League. This season they will be without Gigio Donnarumma, but they've gained Mike Maignan, who was France's best keeper last season. They've lost Çalhanoğlu to Inter, but they've brought back Brahim Diaz once again. There's been a lot of change, so to help guide us through that, let's speak with Martino Puccio and Matt Santangelo from the Football Content Award-winning State of Play podcast, and they are also the hosts of Milan Reports, live shows on Twitch, of which Martino produces, among many other projects of content. These guys are out here doing content, man. And like all of the guests, their links are in the description. So let's do some content. Guys, I think that there's only one place where we can start now. I've been told that I look like every single Italian under the sun. Just today, someone said that I look like D'Silio. But the most common lookalike that is lobbied my way is, of course, Matteo Darmian. However, I think it's safe to say at this point that if there's a dead ringer for Matteo Darmian in the internet football content space, it's Martino. So Matt, your thoughts, please.
I think that's bang on. I think there's like a little bit of like a hybrid between Darmian and Politano. Now they both kind of have my name, right? I know him, but he's a hybrid of those two players. Someone once told me this, I don't know if it never really stuck, but someone once told me I had like a Manuel Lazzari type thing going on.
Anything in your defense, Martino?
No, but could I tell you the fun fact about Politano? Because I'm not sure you know about this one. Is that my cousins in Italy, they live in Rome, and Politano's from that area, and he played in Roma's youth system. My cousins were their neighbors, the Politano's neighbors, and one of my cousins is his godfather.
Hey, close connections. He's not so far away after all.
No, it's a ridiculously small world and a small boot, apparently. So there you go.
But let's get into Milan now. That's stupidity aside. Considering both the arrivals and sort of the departures of the club, have you guys been satisfied with this mercato? I mean, I've seen your Twitter activity. I get the feeling that there's a bit of drama or anxiety or a lack of understanding regarding the sort of transfers that are going on with the club at this moment.
I think me and Martino will probably agree for the most part that we have a more realistic mindset when it comes to the market. I think we just kind of been programmed that way for the past handful of years. Given Milan's absence from major European competition, not really competing for top honors, and having to kind of be a little bit more creative on the market. Of course, getting Champions League does help. There's a lot of conversation going on about some potential, incoming players in the final weeks, which I'm very excited about. That hopefully that Milan can fill the remaining roles in that squad and really round out this roster, because it does need improvement in certain areas. But overall, I like the movement they've made so far. Tomori on a permanent basis, Mike Maignan, they swiftly made that happen to replace Donnarumma. Tonali, they reduced his wages. They also reduced the option in that with Brescia. Getting Brahim on a 2-year extension of that loan. Ballo Torre will help round out the fullback positions, give Teo Hernandez a much-needed breather on occasion. Having said that, they do need an attacking midfielder. They lost Hakan to Inter, and when you look at this attack, it doesn't have as many difference makers as some of the other teams, some of the other people you've spoken with regarding their clubs, obviously Inter and Juventus.
But let's talk about some of those areas of the pitch that you guys touched upon that maybe you could use some more reinforcements. Now, I know that the number 10 spot has been a bit of a question mark for you guys. Of course, Brahim Diaz was brought back on loan. Is he sort of the answer for that position, or do you guys foresee someone else coming in?
I think he could potentially be this guy that could slowly take over as the season goes on, as his role expanded last year. But when you're talking about just him, it's like one injury away from Daniele Maldini being thrust into the fire of, potential Champions League matches. We're talking about other matches like, in Serie A that add up in points where they have certain stretches where they play some of the top teams. And if Brahim Diaz isn't able to go like that, also a player who has not played over a full season of 38 matches plus European competitions like that, can his body hold up? He's a little bit of a smaller player. That is about depth. And I think they're going to go with the best and most cost-effective option.
And Matt, how are you feeling about the defensive end of things? You guys think that you're good there, or some more covers needed as well?
It's definitely been solidified with potentially, obviously, Florenzi coming in. All the top sources are saying that's going to get done, and on terms that really do favor Milan. You're getting a 30-year-old player in his prime who played some pretty decent minutes for the Italian national team at Euro. He's well-traveled. He's played at some pretty big clubs in the Champions League. You still have guys like Kalulu in there who showed you last year that he can play as a right back if you need him, or in a pinch in the central defense. But you have probably the most sure thing of the squad behind the midfield in the defense, and I think they're more than capable of getting through an entire season. Now, I will say this: I think the one player that not many people are speaking on, as far as like young players taking that next step and exceeding expectations and growing into a contributing player, is Matteo Gabbia. Right, because I think when you look at the sort of options that Milan have in central defense specifically, you look at obviously Tomori and Romagnoli and Kjaer. You have three really solid defenders. Kjaer went down last year. You need that fourth option in Matteo Gabbia to maybe elevate his game a little bit, grow into his role. And I think this is a season for him to do it under Pioli, because he's not going to have that sort of burden of pressure week in and week out to be a mainstay in this team.
So it sounds like he could be a potential breakout sort of star for AC Milan, or maybe not a star, but at least someone who establishes themselves a little bit more this season. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. I'll keep my eye out for him. But you guys have had Pioli for, what is it now? It's a season and a half or something like that that you're looking at it with him. How have things looked in this preseason for you guys? How has the approach changed in any way? Has there been improvements that you've noticed? What's going on here in preseason?
Fans who have watched Milan closely the past year, I'm not going to go too much in the distant past, because I think last year really gave fans, and myself included, an understanding of what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and so on and so forth, and really ultimately what the club dynamic looks like and the identity. And it's quite clear to me that in some of these friendlies, we saw some players grow and elevate their game and look a little bit more comfortable. Specifically Tonali. He came over with a lot of hype and praise, and I'm a big fan of him, and it was great to get him into the squad. But he underwhelmed last year, and part of that I think was contributed to him being in and out of the squad. I saw him grow in these friendlies, and it gives me hope that you're going to be able to stretch out that midfield. So if a Kessié or a Benacer are on the international duty for AFCON, you could throw Tonali in there, and you can get a player who's going to deliver, who's going to be very reliable for Stefano Pioli. But in the attack specifically, it's obvious. We go back to the attacking midfield and the wide areas, right? Leao needs to be a little bit more of a refined player. In glimpses, he looks very good. He's very technical, very skilled, and in my opinion, the most dangerous player on his day for Milan. But it's so Jekyll and Hyde that you really don't know what you're getting week to week. I'm hoping that Brahim, with a full season of taking the reins, if you will, as a key member for Milan, that he can maybe double his output, right? Be a guy that can maybe gives you 7 to 8 goals and 7 to 8 assists, maybe reminiscent of the numbers that Suso put up in some of his better years at Milan. I think the fact that we do have Olivier Giroud there shining bright in some of these friendlies, he looks very good. Wearing that number 9 shirt, he's going to be a big addition to this changing room. I think that at the very least in the short term, they have some options there up front to get you some goals.
Adding to that, Martino, what role do you think that Giroud is going to play? I guess it's going to be dependent, of course, upon injuries and such as that. But do you see him being that player that gets into the double digits for you?
I think so. The thing is, like, I've listed it on Twitter plenty of times. Like, okay, everyone's freaking out that they're getting Giroud at this certain age, but can we just at least look back in recent memory of some of the Capocannonieri's in this league? Luca Toni, Fabio Quagliarella. I mean, even Cristiano Ronaldo at his current age as well. I mean, and Ibra, just last season, his goal rate was insane. And I'm not saying he's as prolific as those guys, but if I'm asking you, can Olivier Giroud score 15 goals for Milan? Your answer is probably going to be yes. Last year, it wasn't just about creating enough chances. It was about finishing the chances. Mm-hmm. There was plenty of matches where you said they could have had 2 to 3, 4 goals there. And it even went back to a little bit earlier in Pioli's era with the COVID. There was a match against Spal where they had 25 shots registered. They scored 2 goals. That's a lack of clinical finishing. And that was with matches where they didn't have Ibrahimovic in it. We saw a guy who bagged a hat trick in the Champions League last year. We saw him score one of the best knockout goals of last year's Champions League against Atletico. And to say that's probably the guy that would be second when you're fully healthy is a great thing to have. And I think people are just too fixated on the age thing. I think they need to get over it because this is also still the youngest team in the league.
Atalanta, AS Roma, Napoli, Lazio, it's certainly going to be insanely competitive to crack the top 4. Atalanta has been able to do so over the last few seasons under Gasperini, and despite every summer bringing a few departures for the club, this season the most notable absence probably being Romero, but they've brought in some talented players as well. Juan Musso will be an improvement in goal, which they've needed, and Lovato and Demiral, or Demi Lovato as I call them at centre back, is of big interest to me. For all the issues Demiral has, he's threatened to become a dominant player, and maybe the change of scene will aid him with that. Then there's Napoli welcoming Luciano Spalletti back into the league, and while they haven't made any splashes in the transfer market, 1, you can't sleep on Spalletti, a proven Serie A manager, and 2, well, there's 1 or 2 creators in this video that think the 4-2-3-1 is perfectly suited for Spalletti to succeed. AS Roma under Mourinho. Well, they sold Dzeko and brought in Abraham, who I think will be a great signing for them. Shomurodov, who has scored a few in preseason, Rui Patricio. I mean, if Mourinho can sort out their defensive deficiencies that plagued them all through last season under Fonseca, already that will be a big step. Mourinho himself is a bit of a wild card. It could go either way, really. Certainly he has the capacity to be a good manager still. It's just a question of how flexible he's willing to be with his own outlook and approach. But overall, it adds to the fun of Serie A. Having a character like this, priceless. Lazio have been ever present in the top 4 fight for the last few seasons, last season being one of their bigger struggles, or at least of recent history, I should say, but their supporters will be hoping that the team can adjust to their new manager's vastly different approach. Maurizio Sarri has returned to Serie A via Lazio, and while the system will be a big departure from the 3-5-2 everyone knows at the club, Sarri is a 4-3-3 man. You'd expect Lazio to still be extremely competitive, along with the rest of the top 7. But how do the guys see it all panning out as far as the top 4 race and at the bottom as well? Let's move on to expectations here. Let's start to wrap this up. So where do you guys see Milan finishing? Because top 4, it's going to be a crazy season. You know, you have Atalanta in there, Juve, of course, Inter, then there's Sarri's Lazio, there's Napoli, there's Mourinho at Roma. I mean, what do you guys expect? Let's start with Matt.
When I factor in all the moves and the transactions and just the overall makeup of some of these squads, I think it's going to be another difficult, rugged year for Milan to get into top 4, assuming, they get a couple more players and they fill out the squad the rest of the way. I like them finishing 4th.
And would you put Atalanta, Inter, Juve ahead of them or someone else?
I'm still going to put those 3 teams ahead of Milan. Napoli are going to be a wild card, right? With Spalletti and Roma as well. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be fun, though. It's going to be a fun season.
And you, Martino?
I really think it's going to come down to Napoli and Milan for that last spot in the top 4. Agreed. And if Napoli, like Milan, is able to handle that January window where Koulibaly and Victor Osimhen are gone, then it's going to go down to the final match week again.
The Scudetto hopes, I'm going to be honest, I don't see those again as much being favorites. Definitely not. I think Juve are definitely the favorites now, especially today when it seems like they've wrapped up Locatelli. But everyone else, I don't feel like anyone's moved or improved really. Everyone's kind of moved sideways, or I mean, in terms of Inter, we definitely got worse, but I don't feel like anyone else really improved. So I feel like Inter's still there definitely for top 4. For now, with the current squad, I'm predicting a top 3 finish, to be honest. But if we do get that striker that really, that Inzaghi wants, or that can add those extra goals, I think we can be top 2 and challenge for the Scudetto. All I want is this team to be able to challenge. I think it will be Juve, Inter, Atalanta, and I think Napoli with the addition of Spalletti. But you will see how Milan finish the transfer market. But for now, I feel like the Spalletti factor, that team is custom made for his 4-2-3-1.
And again, this is, August 17th, where Insigne is still on Napoli. Zapata is still on Atalanta. Ronaldo's still on Juventus. But I have my top 4 is Juventus, Atalanta, Inter, and Napoli. I still, again, and maybe we look back and I look stupid for this, but Pioli, for me, while he's done well at managing the team, and I give him respect for what he's done, and rightfully so, he keeps his place, I'm not the biggest fan of Pioli as a coach. So I think that could be there, but absolutely I have them in 5th place. And again, not to stay on the fence, I've told you where I'm going to stay, but I would not be surprised if Roma, Milan, and Lazio get into the Champions League spot as well.
Salernitana coming up. We have the much hyped marketing machine, Venezia, coming through. How do you see them doing? Do you think that it's going to be a up and down for them? Do you think they're going to hang on?
I mean, yeah, I think Venezia, everyone's hipster team this year, thanks to the kits and the marketing, as you said. But team-wise, I'm not really sure they're gonna cut it in the Serie A. There could be a surprise package, but I don't really see them packing much. And I think Spezia last year were one of the surprise packages, but I don't think they have a transfer ban now. Thiago Motta coming in, and I don't really see them staying up again.
I'm not feeling too confident with Venezia's team. I mean, it's very young, and in Serie A, that's not really always the best strategy. They were also the final team to make it up in Serie B, and Serie B is a wild league. Empoli was the only team that qualified, and they qualified with flying colors. And I do think that both of the teams that just arrived will be battling for relegation. Venezia and Salernitana, both of them.
It's really tough. The Salernitana whole background noise with Lotito and everything, I think they're guaranteed to go back down. I don't see how they juggle that. I think the Venezia thing is, listen, the kits are awesome. Nobody's denying that. It's going to be difficult. Empoli, again, they've been up there. They kind of have that identity. The real positive for them is that some of the other teams have regressed that were kind of into. Sampdoria is going to have some issues. How does Fiorentina really handle some of the stuff that's happening? If Dusan Vlahovic leaves again, then what are the other players they're going to be able to juggle with? Spezia lost their manager, obviously, in Italiano, going to Fiorentina. They lose a guy like Pobega. I think there's a lot of question marks for some of these other teams. And the race for the bottom is just going to be crazy. For me, I think most likely out of the 3 is going to be Venezia. I just think they have that aura about them and positive vibes, maybe. Maybe I'm reading too much into the jersey stuff, but I just kind of like what they've done.
With the 3 newly promoted sides, I think one of them will get out, in many ways reminiscent of what Spezia did last year, right? A little bit overachieving, stole some points from some of the bigger sides, right? They were a thorn in the side for Juve, Inter, and Milan. They actually got a victory over Milan, which I don't want to relive that. But of the 3 teams, despite maybe how they spent their money, I would agree with Martino that I do think Venezia is going to be a team that barely stays afloat. Empoli have been notorious for just going up and down. We've seen them feature as recent as a couple years ago, right? When they had, guys like Ismail Benacer, Rad Krunic, who are both on Milan, and some other fine players, but they just couldn't stay afloat. And I think they're going to have that sort of same fate. So I like Venezia to stay up. Again, despite maybe how they spent, I think, $6 million on Gianluca Busio, who is a nice talent from Sporting Kansas City, I do think they're the one team that has the potential to stay up and maybe finish 17th.
Udinese, I think, real quick, I just remembered, real relegation candidate, I think. Yeah. No Rodrigo De Paul, he saved them. But like if you look at all of his goals and assists with those matches that he played last season, they're all 1-goal game. You drop and you get draws there, or you even lose some of those matches where what he did got them the 1 point. And I think they definitely didn't replace him. They can't replace him. And I think it's just going to show once again. I think there's going to be a lot of matches where he could have been the difference that they're looking at a loss or even a draw as opposed to a win. So I think that's the one team, by the way, that could really suffer that I just remembered. So sorry for the late jumping.
Nah, no worries. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they lost their starting keeper as well to Atalanta.
Musso,
yeah. So there you have it, guys. All of the thoughts of some great Serie A creators. Be sure to show them some love, subscribe, follow, etc. And most of all, I hope you guys enjoy this season because it's shaping up to be a really competitive one. My name's Adrian. Thank you for watching this massive video and subscribe if you're new around here. Ciao.